push it. Don't push it, I'll give you a war you won't believe.
First Blood was shot with two endings. In one of them, John Rambo walks out of the police station alive. In the other, he does not. Both were written, both were filmed, both were cut together. And for most of the production, the second one, the ending taken from the novel, in which Rambo dies, was the ending the director intended the film to have. It never reached cinemas. That is not the only thing missing from this picture. The first assembly of First Blood ran roughly 3 hours, and by Sylvester Stallone's own account, it was bad enough that he and the producers looked into buying the film back so that they could destroy the negative. What saved it was a proposal almost no leading actor would make: cut every line of his own dialogue. The film went from about 3 hours to 93 minutes, and the silence that was left behind became the character. Somewhere in what was removed is a piece of backstory that Stallone still says should have stayed, and the reason the sheriff takes it personally. 2 endings, around 90 minutes of footage gone, and a lead actor who tried to have the whole thing destroyed before anybody saw it. 1. 10 years and a dozen Rambos. David Morrell published the novel in 1972, and it sat in development for the rest of the decade while studios and directors came and went. The list of actors considered for Rambo across those years reads like a roll call of the era. Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Clint Eastwood, Steve McQueen, Nick Nolte, John Travolta. None of it came together. Sylvester Stallone signed on after Rocky, took a hand in the screenplay, and made one structural change that shaped everything else. In the novel, Rambo kills. Stallone took the killing out, arguing that the audience had to be able to stay with him. In the finished film, he does not intentionally kill anybody, the only time in the entire series that is true. Production began in November of 1981 in Hope, British Columbia, on a budget of around $15 million, and ran months over. 2. The rights that were sold 3 times. David Morrell sold the film rights to his novel in 1972 to Columbia Pictures for $175,000. Columbia could not make it work, and sold them on to Warner Brothers the following year for $125,000 less than they had paid. Robert De Niro and Clint Eastwood were both considered in that period. A writer named Walter Newman produced a script, and Martin Ritt came aboard to produce. Nothing happened. The rights moved again. By the time 2 distributors called Andrew Vajna and Mario Kassar bought them for their new company Coralco, the story had passed through 3 companies and something in the region of 18 separate screenplays. They paid $375,000 for the rights, and another $150,000 for one particular earlier script. 10 years, 3 owners, 18 drafts, and not one frame of film. 3. The First Blood that was cast and never made. This is the part almost nobody knows. Before Stallone, before Kotcheff, before Coralco, there was a version of this film that got much further than a script. A producer named Carter DeHaven took a 1-year option from Warner Brothers, with financing from a company called Cinema Group. John Frankenheimer, who had made The Manchurian Candidate, was attached to direct. Rambo was cast. Not Stallone, an actor named Brad Davis, who had carried Midnight Express 4 years earlier. Powers Booth, Michael Douglas, and Nick Nolte had all been considered before him, and in June of 1980, the trade press reported that George C. Scott had been cast as well. Then the distributor, Filmways, was taken over by Orion Pictures, and the whole thing collapsed. There is an entire First Blood, with a director and a cast, that simply stopped existing. 4. The ending had already been changed once. Here is where the story doubles back on itself. Everyone remembers that the 1982 production filmed 2 endings and released the one in which Rambo survives. What almost nobody knows is that the same argument had already happened years earlier on a version of the film that was never made. On the Cinema Group project, the one with Frankenheimer attached, the ending was changed too. Michael Kozel did a rewrite in which Rambo lived. That was before Kotcheff came aboard, before Kirk Douglas was cast, and before Stallone had read a page of it. So, the ending everybody thinks of as the compromise, the softened version, the one the test audiences forced that ending had already been written and rejected and rewritten by a completely different set of people on a completely different production. The book's ending had been losing this argument for years before anybody put a camera on it. 5. What Stallone asked for before he said yes. Kotcheff had been told to stop developing the film years earlier and had moved on. When Vajna and Kassar asked him what he wanted to make as their first picture, he named this one. It took roughly a year of negotiation to get the rights out of Warner Brothers. Then Kotcheff suggested Stallone, who was not interested. By his own account, the project had been through so many hands that he assumed there was a reason nobody had made it. He signed anyway, for a reported $3.5 million, and with one condition attached, that he be allowed to work on the rewrite himself. He took a co-writing credit on the finished film alongside Michael Kozol and William Sackheim. And the first substantial thing he did with that access was take the killing out. In the novel, Rambo kills. In the film, Stallone rewrote, he does not intentionally kill anybody, which never happens again in the entire series. 6. The star who walked over the ending. Colonel Troutman was offered first to Lee Marvin, who turned it down reportedly because he did not want to play another colonel. The part then went to Kirk Douglas, who was announced in the trade press in December of 1981 and traveled to Vancouver. It did not last. Ted Kotcheff's account is that Douglas wanted continual script changes, including lines belonging to other actors. And on the ending, Douglas took a firm position. He backed the novel, in which Troutman kills Rambo, and he wanted it kept. When his demands were refused, he left the production, citing artistic differences before shooting his scenes. Richard Crenna was brought in to replace him at reportedly 1 day's notice, and the performance that resulted anchored 3 films. There is a detail here that is easy to miss. Douglas did not leave because the darker ending was being cut. At that point, it was still the plan. 7. The ending they filmed. In the version cinemas got, Rambo is cornered in the police station. Troutman talks him down, and he breaks and surrenders. He is let out alive. In the version that was written first and shot, the confrontation goes the other way. Rambo tells Troutman he cannot face what is waiting for him, that Troutman is the man who made him what he is, and asks him to end it. Troutman hesitates. The scene closes with Rambo dead and Troutman walking out of the room. That was not a late idea. Kotcheff has said he conceived the entire film as a story with that destination. After research with Vietnam veterans, the argument being that the town, the sheriff, and by extension the country were what killed him. The whole picture was built to arrive there, and then it did not. 8. Why they took it out. The film was tested with both endings. Accounts of the reaction differ in the detail. The American Film Institute record describes the test screenings as split, but the outcome is not in dispute. The producers, Andrew Vajna, Mario Kassar, and Buzz Feitshans, chose the ending in which Rambo lives. Stallone had argued against the darker version from early on, and his reasoning is on the record in the film's own making of material. His concern was not squeamishness about the scene. It was what the ending said to the people the film was about, that a veteran watching it would come away with the conclusion that death was the only thing waiting at the end of the line. He did not think a film about coming home should say that. Kotcheff, who had built the whole picture toward the other ending, changed it anyway, and has described it since as going with his instinct. 9. The 3-hour cut. Everything so far concerns the ending. The larger missing piece is the film around it. The first assembly ran roughly 3 hours. Stallone described it years later, on the Howard Stern program, as unwatchable by his account. Something like 90 minutes of it was him alone in the woods, and the character talked continuously. He gave one example that has followed the film ever since. Rambo shoots an owl and then delivers a line about it. There were exchanges with the police written in the same register. Stallone was convinced the film would end his career. He has said that he and the producers looked into buying the picture back specifically so they could destroy the negative, not shelve it, not recut it, burn it. And this was the same year as Rocky III, with everything that was riding on it. 10. The actor who cut his own dialogue. The fix came from Stallone, and it is close to unheard of. His proposal was to remove every line he had not trimmed them, remove them, and let the other characters carry the talking. His argument was that in most films that last, the central figure says very little. and that an audience will fill in a silent character more powerfully than a script can. It worked. The runtime came down to 93 minutes. Troutman and Teasle spend the film explaining Rambo to each other and to us, and Rambo himself barely speaks until the final scene, at which point the dam breaks. The thing the character is famous for: the stillness, the sense of somebody who has stopped being able to say what happened to him, is not a performance choice made on the day. It is what was left after roughly 90 minutes of film, and almost all of one actor's dialogue was taken out. 11. Nobody would distribute it. The film was now 93 minutes long and, in the opinion of the people who had made it, working. That did not help, because Coralco was a financing and foreign sales company making its first feature, and it had no distributor. Vajna and Kassar had to go out and sell it. They could not simply screen the picture and take offers. So they cut together a reel showing roughly half the film and took that around instead. Foreign distribution came together. North America did not. Paramount was given a chance at it and passed. In the end, the film went to Filmways, which had by then become Orion Pictures, the same company whose takeover had killed the earlier version of the project 2 years before. Consider where the film stood at that moment. 2 endings shot, 90 minutes cut, a star who had tried to have it destroyed, and no American distributor willing to take it. 12. The cut Stallone still regrets. Cutting 90 minutes out of a film removes things worth keeping, and Stallone has named one. In the screenplay, Sheriff Teasle had a war of his own behind him. He had fought in Korea. That was the reason he takes Rambo so personally, not small-town pride, but a veteran of a war nobody talks about, confronted by a veteran of the war everybody argues about. Stallone has said explicitly that cutting it was a mistake, and it changes what the film is. As released, Teasle is a man whose ego will not let a drifter walk away from him, and Brian Dennehy plays that very well. With the Korea material in, the 2 men in the middle of the story are both veterans. Both came home to a country that did not want to discuss what they had done, and one of them has spent 20 years turning that into authority while the other has nothing at all. That version of First Blood was written, and it is not the one anyone has seen. 13. What it actually did. It opened on the 22nd of October, 1982, and took $9.2 million in its first week in the United States. By the middle of December, the trade press was reporting more than 40 million. It went on to set opening records in 12 European and Asian countries, and its 3-day gross in Hong Kong set a box office record there. The final worldwide figure was around $125 million on a budget of about 15. And then, predictably, came the argument about the money. In August of 1984, Warner Brothers, Cinema Group, and David Morrell, the author himself, filed suit against Vajna, Coralco, and the production company over the profits, claiming the accounting was faulty. The man who had sold the rights for $175,000 12 years earlier ended up in court over what the film had actually earned. Nobody had wanted it. Then everybody wanted a share of it. There is no cover-up in this story, and that is what makes it worth telling properly. Nothing was banned, nothing was seized, and the darker ending has been available to watch for years. The people who removed it were the people who made it, and one of them said out loud why. He did not want a film about a man coming home to end by telling other men coming home that there was nothing waiting for them. You can disagree with that decision. The director who built the whole picture toward the other ending has never fully settled it either, but it was a choice, made in the open, for a stated reason. What is actually lost is the other film, the 3-hour version with a talking Rambo, and the sheriff with Korea behind him. The missing frame here is not something anybody hid. It is what 90 minutes on a cutting room floor takes with it. If you would like more of these, subscribe.